Gospel of the Lord. I can't help but wonder how Zebedee explained this situation to his wife, the mother of the two brothers, James and John, when he got home. When she asked, "Where are the boys?" "They've gone. This fellow came along." "Did he offer them a bigger boat or more money or something?" "No, quite the opposite. Nothing. But they followed him." And then, of course, we have the same with Peter, or then Simon, and his brother Andrew. They dropped their nets and followed the Lord. They didn't read a treatise, they didn't read a few books or do a theology seminar before they did this. They just followed him, the impulse of love. They'd met the Christ. The lives of the saints in the church will often follow a similar pattern. They can be very dramatic or not so, but to drop one's nets, to follow him, to say yes to the call, the intensely intimate, personal call of the Lord, is at the heart of all the lives of the saints. Those canonized that we know about, and the everyday saints we don't know about, but who hold the church together by the Spirit in their embodied lives of service and love. That's the real church. And we see here this calling of these men and their trust, not knowing at this stage that they will give their lives. They will give their lives for this man who will be revealed as the man God, Jesus the Christ. You look once again at the lives of the saints. So often they faced opposition to their call, quite often from those who loved them the most, their families. Now, Zebedee isn't recorded here as protesting when Jesus calls his two boys. He lets them go. In a world where there was no social safety net, he let his sons go, who provided the livelihood. Perhaps he also realised who they'd met. He let them go. And maybe his wife shared in that wonder and awe and fear and joy, or maybe she was cranky, we don't know. But they went anyway. Ignatius of Loyola, the founder of the Jesuits, he wouldn't go home in the early days of his conversion because he was scared his older brothers would trap him and not let him follow this call that he felt after his injury at Pamplona as a soldier. Thomas Aquinas was famously locked up by his brothers. They sent a prostitute in to try and convince him, I suppose, that the flesh wasn't to be rejected in that sense anyway. Not that Aquinas did reject the flesh, but that kind of flesh he did. He chased her out with a red-hot poker from the fireplace. The brothers relented. During the week, we had St. Francis de Sales facing such opposition from his wealthy family, his father, dismayed that the brilliant young lawyer would go off and serve the poor in meekness and gentleness. And the list goes on and on and on. We can be inspired by the saints, but what about our less perhaps dramatic lives? What are the nets that I need to drop? What's the call that I'm not listening to? What are the nets I get trapped in, caught up in, that I think are essential, but perhaps they're not at all essential? Maybe a hardness of heart for someone in my life I can't forgive. Can I drop that net? Could I share with them the mercy that God gives me every day? Or is it fear of rejection? As Paul says here, we're holy fools for Christ. Do I fear being considered a fool for Christ in the workplace, amongst friends? The answer is probably yes at times, isn't it? We're all human, we're all fragile. But we're inspired by the saints to embrace being fools for Christ, to see in it a pathway to something more beautiful, more joyous, so much more than the world could ever give. There are many everyday saints around us. One man I met once, and you may have heard this story before. I've been here long enough now, I'm recycling my stories, I apologise, but it bears repeating, I think. I used to go to Vietnam quite a bit for work with placing volunteers around the world, and I had a couple of fantastic young men placed in a little tiny village in central Vietnam, middle of nowhere, teaching English to those lovely kids, cared for by the parish and the priest. In any case, when I went to meet them, I was introduced to Dr. Nguyen, who had been very kind and welcoming to these two young Australians in the middle of nowhere. He spoke wonderful English. He was highly educated. When I met Dr. Nguyen, he had a terrible limp and was deaf in one ear. Still only in his mid to late 30s, I think. But the day I met him, he was in the rice fields helping with the harvest with his elderly parents. And that's hard work if you've ever done that, let alone with a limp, I imagine. In any case, Dr. Nguyen ended up there because he'd been a brilliant young physicist at one of the big universities in Vietnam. And this is not that long ago. We're not talking the 70s. We're talking about 15 years ago. And he was so brilliant, they said, must have been a good administrator, they said, look, Dr. Nguyen, you're going to be the dean of the faculty. More money, more prestige, etc. And the president of the university said, look, there's just one little piece of paperwork we have to get out of the way. You have to officially join the Communist Party to be a dean. Well, Dr. Nguyen felt that was incompatible with his Catholic conscience. He wouldn't join the party. And that was a fateful decision. A few evenings later, on his way home from work, he was set upon by the Patriotic Youth Association, who are the proxies for police, whoever, want to have, I guess, some level of deniability. And they beat Dr. Nguyen almost to death, hence his limp and his deafness in one ear. He survived, and then he lost his job because he refused to join the party. So he went back to his parents' very poor little village in the middle of nowhere and helped them tend the rice fields. But the man I met was a wonderful conversationalist, clearly very bright, interested, by the world, intrigued by Australia. A man with such joy and humility and hospitality. And the boys confirmed for me there was no rancour in this man. There was no bitterness. He had found his joy in following the Lord. He had found his joy in being an absolute fool for Christ, a fool in the eyes of the world. You gave it all up. You just had to sign a piece of paper. He's the kind of saintly person who inspires you when you meet them. And he did that certainly for me and so many others. Just by living his life with his integrity of faith and conscience. His love of God came first. He let go of those nets that could have tied him up. And not even the nets of the party were able to stop him. And he found in the great paradox of our faith that in his cross was his greatest joy and his greatest freedom. Following Jesus Christ, in his discipleship of Jesus Christ, and the terrible price he paid for that discipleship, Dr. Nguyen found his peace and his greatest joy.